Hey, it's Melissa from Kiwi Banana, and today I'm going to do a wee video on some things that maybe you want to know about Peru before you come here. So the first one I'm talking about is the extreme diversity of geography in the country. So you've got the Andes Mountains, you've got the sort of arid plains, there's the Amazon sort of rainforest. So there's quite a few different sort of climates within Peru. And of course, depending on what you like, you'll probably travel to wherever it is that you like to go. The official language for Peru is Spanish, of course. However, not everyone speaks fluent Spanish here, so that's something that you may want to be aware of, especially if you're going into more rural areas and areas where maybe they have held on to a lot more of their traditional language and culture. There's several ancient cultures, obviously, that have lived in Peru, dating all the way back to the 32nd century BC. So that is a very long time, and which obviously means that there's a lot to uncover and to be heard and seen of in this country. 32 million people live here now, and because it's such a large landmass, sometimes you may go to places where you don't see that many people, which is great if you like to travel like that. But then there's also the more higher density populated cities as well. So if that's your sort of thing that you're into, you can find that here as well. Now they have, with a lot of the ancient civilizations, some of them were really good with their irrigation and terracing, which is the sort of technology that I guess many of us wouldn't expect civilization to have that long ago, and maybe some of us have lost that sort of way over time, and then now we're trying to regain some of that knowledge and use that to our own advantage, I guess. And back in the day, they used a lot of different sort of monetary systems, I guess you could say, because they didn't have money and they didn't have the same sort of idea of a market that we do today. So they used a lot of reciprocity, I think it's called, and redistribution of resources. So it's quite an interesting concept, and if you're into that sort of thing, you can definitely find some research done on that, probably online. And when the Spanish colonized the indigenous population, unfortunately, the indigenous population declined due to obviously exploitation, socio-economic change, and epidemic diseases that they had not been exposed to before. But I'm sure that many of you have probably been aware or have heard of things like this before when colonization happens in many countries, and I guess I will move on from that topic. The next one I'm talking about is Catholicism, which is a word I always find a bit difficult to say. Doesn't quite come out of my mouth as fluently as I'd like it to, but that is a type of Christianity that is rather huge here, especially in more modern and higher populated areas, and it makes up about 80% of the Peruvian population. So you'll find a lot of festivals and celebrations based around that, but also you may still find some celebrations and festivals based around some of the older ways, the older religions and spirituality, and that they used to be more into. So most places do not have access to clean water. So if you're coming here, obviously, it's highly unlikely that you'll be able to drink out of the tap. You will need to purchase your water or have some sort of filtration system while you're here. Now, there's also a high diversity of plants. When you go from different areas, you'll find that they might have more of one plant or a group of plants and more of another, and some people are very connected for the plants with medicinal use, and also I personally find a lot of the plants here really delicious and really good for cooking and making meals out of, and yeah, it's the food is quite cheap here, especially compared to somewhere like New Zealand where I am from. And you can get a whole range of foods here that I wouldn't be able to at home as well, with that range of diversity and all those irrigation practices and that they had done a long time ago has helped obviously preserve some of the diversity that they have with their plants. And a thing about money here is that if you can, try and get smaller notes, and if you get the larger ones, then maybe you might want to pop to a bank and see if they can split them and put them into smaller notes. More often than not, when you go to ATMs, if you're getting out sort of the maximum amount, it's going to give you the money in larger denominations. The 200 Soleil bills are very hard to break, same with the 100 Soleil bills, and if you're going to rural areas, even the 50 Soleil bills can be hard to break. So if you're traveling on the cheap, and you're obviously going to need a lot more smaller notes. So just be more mindful of that, I guess. Be aware of that, and don't be so surprised if you hand over a bill and they're like, we can't break that. Moving on to the next one. So Peruvian time is a real thing here, and even at airports, I found that many of my flights have not always left on time. When I'm flying in Peru, and just going anywhere or sort of making a time with anyone. Also, depending on where you are in Peru, more often than not, they will say yes to something, even though they're not going to commit to it. So don't always expect yes to be the real answer. So that's something to be aware of when you're in Peru as well. Toilets, we might as well talk about that while we're here. So more often than not, you'll find in many places that are not as highly populated with tourists and things like that, there will be no toilet paper and there'll be no water to wash yourself after you've been to the bathroom. So that's something you might be prepared or at least aware of as well when you're traveling here. But I guess if you're going to stay in places where there are a lot of tourists, and I guess it's not as much poverty, then you probably may not find that as much of an issue. Now, also, depending on your passport, what country citizenship do you have, you can stay here for up to about 6 months at a time, which we're on a New Zealand passport, and that is one of the top countries that we can stay at for the longest with our passport. So, and that's just on like a tourist visa, so that's really, really good. And with New Zealand, if you can save up a bit of money, coming from somewhere like New Zealand, you can probably live here for 6 months quite frugally if you wanted to, and really, really explore the country. And the last thing I want to talk about is when you're arriving here, more often than not, you won't be allowed to come to Peru without an exiting ticket. But when I was about to leave Mexico to fly to Lima, they wouldn't allow me to board the plane without me showing proof of an exiting ticket out of Peru. So I had to quickly sort one out before I got on that plane. So that's something else to be aware of. So that is my video of some things that you might want to know about Peru if you're coming here. And let me know if this has been of any sort of help, and leave your tips and information in the comment section down below.